Welcome into the Gramlich and McLean podcast, presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Gramlich and McLean. Mac, it's our ACC Under Review series. It rolls on here with the SMU Mustangs, who were on a roll this season, Mac. We're going to be putting out 2 episodes per week here in January and February, talking about some of the big ACC brands that we need to get into and discuss. We just put out FSU earlier in the week, so make sure you go look at that. There was a lot to discuss about Florida State and a lot to discuss about SMU. So we had to go get the GOAT, the SMU insider. And he has a great story about Happy Valley, Billy Embody. He's got all the stories, Mac.
Yeah, y'all know anytime that we're talking SMU, we got to hit Billy up. He's the best. He does such a great job for them, and it's always fun. I love talking to him, so we're going to call him up any time. But this was a really fun conversation, and actually, we went about 15 minutes over what we thought we would do, just because we were into some really good conversation, particularly about Kevin Jennings, which you guys will see here right in a minute. But these are so much fun. This is one of my favorite things that we do, KG, just because we get to look back. We're not prophesizing. We're not thinking what's going to happen. We're literally telling you what went down, and we're telling you with people that cover it every single day, are boots on the ground, and it's really, really fun. So big shout out to Billy. Very grateful for his time. And also, I get to wear my beautiful Rowback SMU gear, which I love. And people don't look at me weird because we're talking about the pony. So I get to don it and represent.
Love that. And I get to wear a little classic navy, which could work for a lot of teams.
We're very SMU. Like everything right now is red, white, and blue. So God bless America and God bless the ponies.
Yeah, this could work for any ACC team. But Mac, also shout out to our great friends over at Ingles. I have been making a lot of kind of comfort food recipes lately, thinking some crock pot. What I've been really into, and this is just, to be honest, I've been giving it to my child a lot, is just like a classic grilled cheese with tomato soup. Oof,
of course.
It just hits different when it's 40 degrees outside. And Ingles has everything you can need to whip up something like that just is perfect for this type of weather. So let's get to a quick message from Ingles, and then we will get into our interview with Billy Embody.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Billy Embody, KG, you just joked our official SMU correspondent. Great to see you, brother. The season's wrapping up for the ACC, and we're kind of doing a thing here where we're going around the league and just kind of hearing from people whose boots are on the ground, about what this season looked like, and you certainly are all over it. So welcome back. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Happy New Year to the GM pod crew.
Billy, you're the best. We appreciate your time. We know you're busy. You've got planes to catch. You've got wine to drink with Bill. I mean, you've got things to do. But speaking of that, before we get into this season as a whole, please recount, because this was going viral on Twitter. I believe that whatever airport, the State College Airport, I guess, was too packed with planes/private jets. So you guys had to land somewhere else, and then you're on this like party bus trying to get to the game in Happy Valley against Penn State. You're running late. Bill posts a picture. Like, walk us through this whole situation, please.
Yeah, so we left Dallas at 6:30 in the morning for game day up there in State College, and we're about 20 minutes from landing, and we got Bill and Liz, who took a whole crew up there, really appreciative of them. Mike Craven, another reporter, and myself, along with Bryson DeChambeau and Craig James and Lance McElhaney, and just a crew.
Squad.
Yeah, squad. And 20 minutes out, it's like kind of go up to the cockpit, and it normally doesn't happen. Normally just set the plane down, and Bill and Liz are like, we're going to have to be diverted. And I'm like, oh man, where? Like, I was thinking Pittsburgh or something.
Yeah.
Williamsport, home of the Little League World Series. Us and about 5 other SMU planes got diverted. And then there was other people that got diverted elsewhere. But I have my conspiracy theories that this is just my opinion. I was talking to another pilot, and he kind of said, I don't know. There's plenty of runway space and place to Park Plains there in State College. So that is neither here nor there. But anyway,
Wow.
we have to get on a party bus, and Bill and Liz, it was like 30 people that were allowed on the party bus. They just said as much as we can fill it. There were other people there that were waiting on Ubers, like $300 Ubers to go from Williamsport to State College. And we made the hour-and-a-half trek. We ended up walking in about halfway through the second quarter. And, things weren't going well, but we had a blast. It was, one of those just, you'll remember it forever kind of days, just for the great company, but also where you were going, what you were going to go do. And, it was just kind of a first world microcosm of how the day went for SMU fans, for sure. But I had a blast still. This was such a cool season. And even though it didn't end the way everybody wanted it to, by any means, that was just, it was cool. So,
yeah. Well, I think it's a microcosm of SMU football and the brand and the power and the money that you guys took all the parking at the freaking airport that you had to park somewhere else. So I love that. We'll talk about more of the playoff here in a second and kind of be the exclamation point, because even though, it didn't go the way you wanted, for SMU to do that year one, being in the ACC, and just in general, making a playoff. It's incredible. And the first ever iteration of this 12-team deal here. So we'll get to that in a second, but let's go all the way back. Just looking at this season, I remember, being at practice and, hanging out with you, and we're talking back and forth. And we're like, man, we think this team has a shot. And then the Nevada game happens, and I'm like,
oh man,
this team sucks. They're terrible. They're not good. And then, Houston Christian, you score. Okay, great, whatever. I've never even heard of that team. And then you lose to BYU. And dude, I'm totally like gone. I'm off the wagon. I let the Mustang go, and it ran away. And, I look up maybe 4 or 5 games in after the change and Kevin's doing his thing. And I'm like, hold on now. Maybe this is more of what we really thought. So walk me back all the way to September 6th and where your mind was, 2-1, SMU, and, where you thought maybe they'd go from there.
Yeah, that, those two of those first 3 games were really tough because it exposed all the things that could go wrong for SMU. You had a defensive line that struggled to contain a running quarterback. Okay, that's the book was out there. Nevada kind of showed that, and then the offense kind of ran into situations where it just flat out stalled against halfway decent teams that played hard. And at that point, we didn't know how good BYU was going to be for much of the season. But that was kind of where I was at, was you got a couple of different things to solve, but you'd at least found a running back. You'd really found a run game, which SMU didn't have the last 2 seasons in a way. And they were able to kind of man up and make the tough decision and move away from Preston Stone and go with Kevin Jennings, which over the course of those 3 games, you could tell, and every time he got in there, he at least gave them something. They moved the ball. It was at the point where Preston Stone had been going through a bunch of 3 and outs, save for the second half against Nevada, and that was setting the team back so much. And Kevin was at least able to move the offense, add that dynamic element with his legs, with an offensive line that was struggling to pass protect, which we saw rear its ugly head against Clemson and Penn State for sure. But, at that point, not going back to when Kevin got here, I was pretty high on what he could be if it would pan out. Just the way he led South Oak Cliff to a historic state championship, what he did all those games and kind of putting that team on his back. Because everyone knows South Oak Cliff now is like the star-studded roster. That wasn't, they were just kind of coming on the scene there. Like he was your Taj Boyd, so to speak, of South Oak Cliff.
Great analogy.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. We'll see who the next one after Kevin is. But, for SMU to make that decision, it took a lot. That was a big deal. That, truthfully, if it didn't pan out, Rhett would have lost probably 95% of the fan base. Honestly. And it did pan out. They went on a roll, and you saw all the things that Kevin could do, and you play from ahead, you get a little confidence, and then the defense can tee off on people. And so, yeah, it was really, really rough around that BYU game. And of course, you had the bye week, so you had to hear about it for 2 weeks. And the question of, wow, Rhett Lashlee, why would you name the starter Kevin Jennings that Tuesday after BYU, allow TCU time to prepare for him and allow 2 weeks? It was, everything was being just broken down and criticized. And the reality is SMU, over however many seasons Rhett's been here now, I think 3, they've gotten better as the season has gone along, and they took a jump up this year. And maybe that didn't hold true in a way with the postseason, but they've been able to figure out where they have deficiencies and strengths, and they've worked on all of those things and helped get the team better each year. And so that's what they did after BYU. They took a long, hard look, and they made a tough decision, and it panned out.
And it's a really tough decision. It's a, like you said, a gutsy call from Rhett Lashlee. Before we get to the turning point, which was kind of that TCU, FSU, Louisville stretch for sure, I'm curious for you, Billy, thinking back to fall camp, because we have this age-old saying in sports that you don't lose your job due to injury. And that's what happened to Preston Stone. He gets injured. Kevin Jennings comes in, plays well in the AAC championship. Obviously, there's some buzz there. But when we were talking to Rhett before fall camp, it still sounded very much like Preston Stone's team. So I guess my question is, was Kevin Jennings better in camp, but it was still just Preston Stone's team?
Yeah, I think there are so many levels to this, right? Like Kevin got pretty much all of spring ball because Preston was still recovering too. And you can just tell certain things about, and I think in particular this jump up to P4, where Kevin was probably going to be able to handle it better. And whether it be the arm strength, the ability to extend tighter windows. And when Preston started off really slow against Nevada, I think that thing, like people forget about Preston, the first 6 games of his career as the full-time starter for SMU in 23. I mean, it was at a point where they beat East Carolina, and it was like an inept offensive performance to last like 5 minutes. And I was sitting there like, is this time? Like, do you pull the plug? And he ended up turning it on and figuring it out and all those things. But there was always kind of like all right, has SMU just built this portal team and some high school guys too that was so much better than the AAC? And that's why they were able to roll through and kind of cover up some of the things that, Preston maybe didn't do that well. And I think that was partly true. And then you see Kevin do some of the things he did. And if guys make plays around him, they look even better. And it was just a matter of, would he get the opportunity? And, in his opportunities early in the season, he took advantage of them. So I think in fall camp, they were both good, to answer your question. But I just think with the way the team was structured and built, Kevin just, clearly gave them the better chance to move the football, be successful. And it was just kind of apparent that whatever was going on with Preston in there, whether it be bad pass protection or even when he had time, I mean, they're just not good offensively. Like, you can't go 3 and out, 4 of your first 5 drives every game or whatever. You just can't do it. So.
Yeah. And that's difficult. I mean, you kind of, dance all around it, but that is a hard decision to make, because it's similar to, toothpaste. Once it's out, you can't go back and forth.
No.
I mean, it's the confidence, the team, the fans, like quarterback is so unique. And there's times where I don't like that. I want to sit guys down, and, you want to, if they're not having a good game, hey, just come sit right here and watch for a little bit. We'll put you back in. But you really can't. You really can't, because it's the hardest position in sport, man. And so really good job by coach and everybody involved. I'm sure Derek King had a piece of that, and everyone kind of making that decision, because then when we had a week in the bye week, and I'm sitting there just thinking you guys are terrible, it explodes. 60 points against TCU. You score every possible way that you can, defensively, special teams, offense, and then you go on that run that KG just alluded to, playing basically the ACC championship of a year ago in Florida State, who you annihilate, and then a very good Louisville team, a ranked Louisville team at the time, and win by a touchdown. That's when I was kind of like, whoa, uh-oh. they figured something out. These guys are looking really, really good. So what happened, I guess, in that bye week or in that 3-game stretch, that really just helped you imagine what this team could really do moving forward.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Kevin brings to the table, and you can look at the Clemson game in a microcosm, and you can look at the Penn State situation in a microcosm and say, oh, he flustered or this or that, and the reality is Kevin really doesn't, and almost to a fault, doesn't get too high, too low at all. Like, he is so calm. He really just brings this energy without bringing an emotional side of it to the team. And I think the team just really reacted this year better to it, and for whatever reason. And I think that's really what settled them down is knowing that Kevin had the keys to the car. He had moved the ball. He's been rewarded for moving the ball by getting the starting job. And now let's go out and do some of the things that we know we can do with him as the starting quarterback. And this goes back probably into last year in 23, when he would come in ice cold off the bench when Preston was hurt, and he came in or this, I guess, would have been 2022. And Tanner Mordecai goes down, and he leads a 92-yard touchdown drive against Memphis at the end of the half, just ice cold off the bench, and steps in at Tulsa after Preston gets hurt and leads them to their first win at Tulsa in 10 years. So he just kind of has this way about him that the team reacts well. And I felt like that was a big piece, just knowing he had the keys to the car. Everybody settle down. We're going to start differently because Kevin's going to have the start here. So for better or for worse. And they had a lot of confidence, I think, that if they played up to their standard, which defensively they had, they would be able to beat TCU. It was a matter of the offense picking things up, and the defense just was fine with playing the complementary football, and the offense did take off and beat the brakes off TCU, and it just kind of took off from there.
Okay, let's stay on KJ for a second, and then we'll get into Brashard Smith and Elijah Roberts and just all these other guys that had great years. But going off of that, I think this is what a lot of SMU fans maybe want to hear from you, Billy. When you look at the ACC championship and you look at the game against Penn State, the turnovers from Kevin Jennings were obviously the biggest factor in both games. The turnovers early, where Clemson got to build a big lead. The turnovers early, where Penn State got to build a big lead. I mean, it's a same story, different game.
Yeah.
So my main question is this a problem? Like, is this something that needs to be, if it needs to be addressed, how is it going to be addressed going forward? Because obviously Jennings has all the talent in the world. We've talked about that. But how does this get fixed?
Yeah, the Duke game too. I mean,
yes, thank you.
And here's the hard part, and to Eric, your point earlier about sometimes you just want to sit a guy down. I mean, maybe SMU's quarterback room in the future without okay, Preston, you can go in, and then, there's that kind of weird dynamic. Now it's just Kevin starter, Keldrick Luster, you're the backup. Maybe they get Tyler Van Dyke, maybe he's the backup next year. I don't know. But there's kind of a more clear cut, less BS around that situation that they could maybe do moving forward. But it's a problem. I mean, like, you can't do some of the things he did. Now, I understand you're living and dying by the creativity a little bit that he brings to the table, and there are some plays that are like, wow. Like, that throw he had on that game-tying touchdown drive against Clemson was unbelievable. Not just for the touchdown right before that, where he kind of threw it around a couple people, and then I think he had another throw where he flipped his hips against Penn State and juked out Abdul Carter or some other fast guy that they had chasing after him, bought time and threw a dime across the middle. He does some of those things that are wow plays, and he showed throughout a whole ACC regular season schedule that he can do some of those things and be more than fine. I mean, they beat the brakes off of a bowl team in Cal. They beat the brakes off of a Virginia team that was good, close to bowl eligibility. They had some of these wins that were not even close. I mean, they trailed 5 minutes in ACC play during the regular season.
Right.
That's nuts. And that stuff deserves more credit. But at the same time, when you play better defenses, and I think this is a piece to where SMU has to get him a little bit more help, considering all they lost too, you can't make those back-breaking mistakes. Like, I think one of the best games Kevin played was against Cal, because all he had to do was direct the offense and not turn things over, because Cal was inept without their quarterback. There's complementary football, and you got to take some of the turnovers that you're going to get with Kevin Jennings, but starting fast is so important. And at the beginning of the game, what did you see Cade Klubnik do? Obviously take advantage of short fields and the opportunities he was given. But even in that, over the course of that game, he never made a decision that really put the ball in jeopardy.
Right.
And he was playing with a lot of house money. And if Kevin early in the games takes that kind of approach, like, hey, when SMU's on the road at Virginia, early in the game, there were times when they threw it away. Totally fine. You know what? Live to fight another day. We'll punt. We'll keep rolling here. That's where I think just the in-game reps he's just got to get more of.
Yeah.
And I think to an extent, he felt like besides Brashard Smith, he really had to do it all.
Gotcha.
You know, he was getting chased around the last 2 games in particular a ton. Cal even got a lot of pressure on him. You know, I just think it was one of those things where he tried to do too much and it really came back to bite him. But you could see even in the Duke game, like, which is the wild part, they were moving the ball up and down on Duke. He just happened to turn it over 5 times. And they were moving the ball in Penn State. They went to the red zone 4 times. You know, they had opportunities in that game, which makes it so frustrating. And same with, you know, Clemson, those 2 early turnovers. If you just throw that interception away, maybe you win. Maybe. But that's the thing where he's just got to grow. And so,
Billy,
yeah.
You bring up Cade. It's funny too, because I want to get that should be a hopeful comment for SMU fans, because SMU fans who may not be as familiar, Cade was a turnover disaster last year, and this year completely transformed. So if Kevin Jennings can take that step with just the natural ability that he has, I mean, we're talking legit Heisman conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we already will be having that just because of the excitement with them. But, you know, throughout the season, I totally agree with you, KG. And, you know, it's weird because the numbers aren't like brutal, but it was the timing of it. It was the timing of, you know, the interceptions and when they happened. And, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, Billy, I'm fascinated to hear what you've heard and whether it's press conferences or weekly interviews or, you know, discussions that you can share just on how do they want to manage that? Because, you know, we've spoken with numerous people about Cam Ward on that staff and same thing here. And, you know, I think of Tommy Castellanos a couple of years ago, now at FSU. I think of Anthony Calandria. And it's like you can't take away that special piece of them. A lot like Josh Allen in the NFL. That dude was turning the ball over left and right, but he's also making plays that only he can make. So you can't take that away. You can't overcoach it and coach it out of them. Like, where is the happy medium? Is it just having, you know, the expectation that, he might give it away time to time?
Yeah, I think it is kind of the expectation that you might see a little bit of that. Again, it's the timing, you know, and it's also the opponent too. I mean, Duke was one of the better defenses in the country. Clemson, Penn State, 2 of the better teams in the country. I mean, there's that part of it. Like you can't have the discussion of, all right, how are you going to live with it? But you're also living with it in the ACC championship in the college football playoff, and you're there in a large part because of him. But yeah, like they just, in terms of what's next, like to your question on that, this is a huge opportunity for him because luckily for him, he's got now a boatload of NIL money, which he's earned. I mean, what he changed SMU into this season, I mean, he truthfully probably didn't get enough technically, you know, just from the, you know, media value that he brought to the table because of how good they were and all the buzz around him, Nick Saban talking about him, all those things. But what he can do now is he can go out, and if he wants to go fly to wherever quarterback coach that trains NFL guys, he can do that. You know, just the reality of it, Kevin didn't come from, you know, a QB factory family that, you know, invested in that level of training. And, you know, not everyone can. Very few can to that level. Kevin came in as a raw, skinny kid coming out of South Oak Cliff and you know, is going to get stronger in the weight room. I think that's a key piece for him. Yeah. But he's going to be able to sharpen his toolbox, and he's got now all the resources in the world. One of his agent is David Mulgeta, who's one of the biggest agents in the game right now.
I'm sure he's pretty big.
Yeah. What a world we live in. But now he's going to have all the resources and contacts to do all those things, and also with the help of Derek and Rhett and the whole staff to take that next step. There's no question who the starting quarterback is for SMU this offseason, and there won't be. And that's there's also something to be said for that.
Yeah, and I think it's something to the point that you said about, knowing when to do it, or the games that it did happen in. Like the margin of error against Clemson, against Penn State is razor thin. I mean, that's NFL defenses that you're going against. Those guys will be playing on Sunday. And so, you just have to know, I probably can't get away with what I could against X team before. And so there's a thing to that too. And that part of it is experience and going through it and understanding that. And I'm with you. He has what a great opportunity to continue to sharpen and develop into one of the best in the entire country, because the spotlight's there, the excitement, the hype, the attention, it'll all be there preseason. And we'll see, what kind of work have you put in, will you have done to take that next step. One guy that thrived in his opportunity and really played at such a high level, and we really didn't know coming in, was Brashard Smith. I mean, that guy, it was so fun to watch. From being a weapon, a Swiss Army knife, utility piece, whatever you want to call it, at Miami, where his most carries he got in one season was 9 to 235 last year at SMU. I mean, that is incredible to see. And he's going to be a great draft pick. He's going to be a high draft pick. He's going to the Senior Bowl, all these different things. I'm sure Combine. Just walk us through that journey from your perspective and what Brashard Smith did at SMU this year.
Yeah, from my perspective, SMU was kind of toying with, do we need to take another running back? We got Jalen Knight, we got Kamar Wheaton, got LJ Johnson, we got all these guys back. Do we need one? And, I give them a lot of credit, because whenever they have issues, they really do everything they can to try to address them. And one issue was return man. And funny enough, Brashard maybe got 4 or 5 kick returns all year.
Isn't that crazy, though? Just the world that we're living in. Like, literally, we took this guy on a whim that we needed help returning kicks. Yeah. And he had 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns. I mean, it's insane.
And they put him in the running back room so that they wouldn't chase off like a Jake Bailey and a Roger Daniels and all the other guys that they have in the slot receiver room. It's just kind of portal world too. And at the end of kind of his spring, I think it was spring, somebody said to me, they were like, that guy is different. Look out. Like, it's hard because the lights aren't on, they're not really hitting, so you don't really know. Yeah. But they were like, if the vision translates, look out. And boy, did it. I mean, that's what it came down to. It's just a matter of having an absolute stud athlete back there who is tough, is not afraid of contact. I mean, he got hurt, and I'm sure I'd be interested to see if he gets some sort of surgery or something to clean something up. But I mean, he was falling forward, spin move, trying for every single inch out there. And that's something that I would say is probably a lost art for running backs these days, that ability to fall forward. And they got that with him. And I mean, he's just a terrific athlete that panned out. So credit to him. He made the most of this year, and he's going to make a lot of money in the NFL now.
Oh, he did. And he was really fun to watch. And some of those, Miami transfers, they've seemed to have had a lot of success coming to SMU. But let's talk about, before we get to the defense, because I think the defense, especially even in those big games that SMU lost, obviously a lot of it was not on the defense. So we'll get to that. But just quickly on the tight ends, with Hibner and RJ Maryland, of course, getting hurt. And I think we all thought, this is going to be a real problem. But so just speak to what you thought about that and Hibner stepping up. And then even more too, Billy, this tight end room in 2025, is there a better one in the country?
Right. Assuming they're both coming back, right? They're both there?
Yes. Yeah. Both coming back, unless somebody really tampers heavily in the spring or whatever. I mean, disclaimer for all future roster talk, I guess. But no, I mean, when RJ went down, I mean, first of all, I feel so bad for him. I mean, just an awesome kid, great family, all of those things, and was having a really solid year and had made some huge plays for SMU. And at the same time, Matthew Hibner came in over the summer and really shocked the staff with how athletic he is. I mean, I think he jumped 36 when they got it. Yeah. And I mean, he looks like he is a grown man. He coming from Michigan. He's played a bunch, a few seasons for them, won a national championship. And there was kind of, a few people that were just saying, hey, man, I'm not saying RJ's not starting. He's our guy. But Matthew Hibner, there's something about him. And, I mean, he really panned out because, I mean, he stepped right in and was awesome. So when you look at the future for SMU at that position, I mean, I think you're looking at RJ Maryland kind of like a Kyle Pitts, split out. Also have some Matthew Hibner as the inline. And then you've got returning receivers like Jordan Hudson and Romello Brinson. That'll be the true outside guys. But, part of the reason why they haven't maybe prioritized spending on an outside receiver is because they've got RJ Maryland who, they're hopeful he's going to be ready to go and be the dude. And they can split him out, and he's going to create so many issues and, just move them all around.
Yeah, we have seen such a resurgence of the tight end position just because the more you can do, right? It was almost, because it was end of line. And it's like, well, we don't really need that. Well, now, you have these freaky hybrid dudes that are big. I mean, they're bigger than receivers, so you can block. But also they're a matchup nightmare. I mean, just put them out there and let them work. And RJ's skill set is fantastic. And I'd love to see that. It's a lot like Aronde Gadsden, that we've seen at Syracuse and the things that he brings to the table. Put him everywhere. Just let him feast, let him do his thing. I think that room is going to be nasty, moving forward, and excited to see that. You mentioned the wide receiver room. I do want to, touch on this before we go defense. That's KG's favorite thing is defense, so I'll let her touch on that. I was really impressed just because it was like we had a guy went down. We had another guy went down. It was like everybody was just ready to go. You got 100 people. I'm looking at the stat sheet here, over 24 catches. And it was just who wants to play this week? Who's available? And you go out there and do that. What did you see from the wide receiver room all year long?
I think after the BYU game, we saw the guys kind of elevate their game. And I will say this, and it doesn't get talked about enough. First and foremost, they all block and are all willing blockers. That group, that is something that they do really well. And I know that's kind of the opposite of what receivers are expected to do in a sense, but it's a huge deal when you have that hustle, when you have that effort, and it does help set the tone for the offense too when you see those guys hustling. So at the same time, you didn't see a guy emerge. SMU didn't have a Rashee Rice or Cortland Sutton on this year's team come away with over 1,000 yards and things like that. But they had depth for a while, and then they ended up being pretty thin due to injuries. Jake Bailey, they lost Romello Brinson for the regular season. They, just really just saw it kind of dwindle, and it hurt. And I think just they were not able to see anybody take that next step, which is the biggest thing. That you saw the flashes with that room. And that's where, I think talked about earlier, giving Kevin more around him. If he had a bona fide number one around him, maybe that would help. And maybe RJ Maryland's that guy. Maybe Matthew Hibner is that guy in his mind next year. But someone has to take that next step from a pure production separation, because there were tight windows just about every time SMU threw the ball to a receiver.
It's a good point.
And, it'd be nice if you could just throw a 9 and the guy's going to have 3 steps on him. I mean, or throw a slant and he's going to be a technician and create that space. The guys that Clemson has running around. Bryant Wesco from Midlothian. I would argue that SMU is.
Hey! We don't need any tampering on this podcast.
No. I'm not saying tampering. I'm not saying
leave them alone, Bill.
But you've got to find guys like that. Like they're not. Clemson's going to retain who they want to retain. I mean, let's be real there. But no, it'd be nice. In the past, SMU's always had an offense, always had receivers. I mean, they're at one point, and I think this is probably true, there's more SMU wide receivers in the NFL than, University of Texas. I mean, there's some stud receivers that have come out of SMU over the last decade. There has not been really NFL guys over the last few years, and that's something that, outside of Rashee Rice, that maybe is something that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Billy, you were about to cross the line there, buddy. Appreciate you
never at school. Figured never at school.
We're kidding. Okay, well, let's talk about the defense. As I alluded to, When you look at, let's just say, the last 4 games, all right, you give up 7 to Virginia, 6 to Cal. We know Cal was up without Mendoza. And then you got Clemson, Penn State. I would say the offense gave up 14 to Clemson, at least. The offense gave up 21 to Penn State, at least. So overall, the defense did enough, it felt like. Is that, I mean, obviously the turnovers they forced early in the season and just kind of the craziness was great. But I felt like the defense was solid all year long.
Yeah, I mean, especially the run defense. And that's where it really teed up everything else for SMU. You know, they were able, even if they gave up some yardage in the passing game, which they did, they were one of the, I think they were probably hanging out around 95th in the country in passing defense or yards given up. I mean, teams were also having to pass on them late in the games, you know, to try and come back too. So there's probably an advanced stat or something somebody could pull up in terms of meaningful game time or whatever. But, you know, for SMU's, you know, defense, they set the tone stopping the run. And I mean, they stopped everybody running the football. And even Penn State kind of got, you know, what they wanted at some point in the game. And they were also just running the football because they were up big. But, you know, SMU's defense as a whole played really well against Penn State and slowed them down way more than enough to give SMU a chance. The turnovers are what ultimately killed them, of course. But yeah, SMU, credit to their staff, credit to their players for being ready to go. But that was after the Nevada game. I think it was a little misleading that, you know, some people watched that game and they said, oh my gosh, this highly touted defensive line or whatever that was brought in. Look, they had a bad matchup against a running quarterback. He extended plays a bunch. He made some plays that he didn't make the rest of the season in a way. You know, it was just one of those things like that. It just didn't look that great, but they had depth. They had size. They had a lot of experience on the defense, and it showed. And after the BYU game, which they played well still, they got in a room and they said, look, we've also got to be the guys that really step up and own this from a turnover perspective and creating pressure, and let's not give them anything on the ground and play to our standard too. And that's what the defense around SMU does a really good job of. They have very few letdowns. I mean, their version of a letdown is SMU's up, you know, 17-0 or 10-0, and they give up, you know, a long drive finally, maybe after like 5 drives or something, you know, like that's their standard. I mean, that's what they've delivered. And so they've got a lot to replace. They've got a lot of veteran leadership that's, you know, walking out the door, graduating. They also have a lot of key talent back for next year too. So yeah, when you look at that Clemson game, that Penn State game, I mean, again, sometimes the casual first observer of SMU would be, wow, SMU didn't look like they should be on the field with, you know, Penn State, for example. I don't know. Like that. Yeah. We know what Abdul Carter did to Savion Byrd. Unfortunate for SMU. We know what Kevin Jennings did to SMU in a way. You know, that's unfortunate for them. Right. Because the defense played a hell of a game in both those two environments, and it's just unfortunate. They didn't look out of place at all.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And I think it's you know, the identity relatively stayed the same. I mean, with being a top, I think it was 3 or top 2 in the country last year with sacks and tackles for loss. And the big point of emphasis this year was the turnovers, which exceeded all expectation, probably scoring on defense, one of the best in the entire country. So we saw strides from that side of the ball. And as you mentioned, stopping the run. When you move to another level, typically you see weak offense and defensive lines. That was not the case for a majority of the season from either front with SMU. And I know the struggles that were, sometimes present with the offensive line, but I was blown away and really excited by that. One thing that we never do really ever, defense is rare. Like we're good that we got to this part of the ball, but we never talk about the third phase, and that's the kicking game. And Colin Rogers was a monster. I have to bring him up. Field goal kicker here, place kicker for SMU. This guy was unbelievable. Just bomb after bomb. I think he led the country in 50-yard field goals made. He's a weapon. I believe he's coming back. A guy that you can really grow on, and really very similarly to what Clemson did in marching down the field and being confident we can kick this and make it. For everybody around to know that you have that's a big deal. And something that's going to be exciting moving forward, for this team. Billy, I do want to kind of wrap with two things here. Just this season in general. We've asked everybody. We probably asked you a million times on it. But what did this really do for SMU getting to an ACC championship game, being undefeated in the regular season in conference play, and making the inaugural 12-team playoff? What does that, can you put it into words of what that means for SMU moving forward?
Yeah, it means a lot for the university overall. I think applications are up, 40, 50%, depending on what part of the school, which is nuts. And you have so much that you can, I'm sure there's quantifiable numbers in terms of media value and all those things, but the school has gotten so much visibility with this move, but also with the season. That's the big thing. And that's a huge piece. Sold out Ford Stadium numerous times this year. The crowds were fun. They were into it. The student section's right behind the opposing bench. It's turned it into a program that I think now that they've finally got to this level and reached the college football playoff, and for the first time, school leadership has really been around other game days and other stadiums. And you can see now the wheels are turning in a lot of people's heads that, okay, all right, we got to do the rest of the stadium now. And it's not okay, we just built this $150 million end zone complex. All right, let's give it a rest. No, they're starting that planning process of what's next with the stadium, because they want everything. They want the curtains to match the drapes, the kitchen to accent the living room. All the things got to look A1, and the rest of the facilities SMU has do. So there's all of that big time thinking that I think until SMU went through this season and got around some of its league, fellow league members and seen other stadiums, that they really couldn't put into, exact, quantifiable ranking of where that stands. And now the stadium is something that I think they'll do here relatively soon, or at least, begin that formal planning. But then you get to the on the field portion, and to have this season and to have a guy get talked about as much as he did by College Game Day and Kevin Jennings, and Brashard Smith be a star offensively for SMU, and a defense that was among the best in the country, and Colin Rogers even kicking bombs and giving the pit shark thing right back at him. All those things, that all the moments throughout this overall season that SMU got, both on the field and then in the media, were just huge, and that all impacts recruiting for the high school ranks in particular. I think this 2026 class has a huge opportunity to be even better than the 25 class, which is I think finished around 35 or so, and it's a class that for half of it they weren't in the ACC. They were recruiting a lot of these guys. You start recruiting them so far out, so recruiting will help. And then once the portal market gets figured out, and maybe kind of comes back down to earth a little bit, they'll see the more traditional impact of winning, which they've seen in the past. And I think some of the portal lands they could have in the future are more splashier types that some college football playoff contenders routinely get. Sure.
And that all makes sense. Something that you just said there that really piqued my interest before we talk about 25 for a second. How about, and I know you're great friends with him, we've become friends, but Bill Armstrong and others that have really put in a lot of time, money, and resources. And you just mentioned the on the field success, that it's almost like an ROI. There is return on what you've done. Is that going to take another step? Because it works, and it does work kind of with that. Are those guys happy with kind of where things are and how they can affect and change this game?
Yeah, I think there are people that have gotten the taste of this type of a level of success and how fun it is to, we even did a live show right next to the stadium before the ACC championship, and had 600 people there watching us do a live show. And some of that type of fun that we can have, you want more of it, and you want the boulevard packed, and you want to be eating barbecue with the ACC network on TV. That was one of our top moments, and you don't get that without success on the field. As much as SMU is the one of the shiny new toys, so to speak. The on the field success propelled all of that, and I think that's where you'll see and have seen, extending Rhett. Scott Simons, the defensive coordinator, is one of the top paid guys now. Kevin Jennings. I mean, you are doing some really unique things in terms of retaining players. They haven't had one departure right now that they would have wanted to keep. You'd love to keep Preston Stone, but he wasn't going to stay, obviously. But I think there's that taste of success that those guys want more of, and the big thing now is capitalizing on it from a whole as SMU, because SMU has a lot of money, but you don't want those same guys to do it all. I mean, that still wears on them. And I think there is that kind of, if there's one thing that needs to be hammered home, maybe a little bit more in a way, which is hard to do, is SMU needs more of that lost generation to come out and give a little bit of money and things like that. Because SMU did lose, probably 10 years of graduating classes where football was not a thing. And they're all in their kind of prime giving, so to speak, opportunity.
That's interesting. And of course, as the stadium gets expanded, to have more people that want to come back and get season tickets and all that. Okay, Billy, last one. We know you're busy. You got to go do stuff. When you look at the 2025 schedule, some interesting things stand out as we just look ahead for a second. Opening, there may be a game before this, but I think opening with Baylor, which is cool, in Dallas. Traveling to Clemson, which of course we're all excited for here. And Billy, we'll hook you up with exactly where you need to go. Hosting Louisville, hosting Miami, at TCU, a lot of interesting stuff. So even beyond the schedule, if you have some notes on the schedule, feel free. But for you, and even just for the fan base, what do you feel like the expectations are? Way, way, way too early, but for 2025.
Way, way, way too early. And I'm a total believer of this. Like, when you have a high-level quarterback coming back, you should win 10 games. I mean, they can cover up bad defenses from time to time. I mean, look at Jaden Daniels a couple years ago for LSU. Like, they can just will you to certain things. And I think SMU has a high-level quarterback coming back. So I think the expectation should be 10 games. And it might look a little different than what SMU did this past year. I mean, they might get into a little bit more of a, shootout with some teams. But you look at the schedule, I mean, Syracuse, Kyle McCord's gone. Cam Ward's gone from Miami.
Maybe. Kyle McCord is petitioning for another year. We'll see.
Is he? Is he? Okay, all right. Well, I love watching him play, so I'd be all for that. But you have some games that could really be shootouts, but you also see some quarterbacks move out. Cal lost Mendoza. So, I mean, I say 10 wins. I mean, that should be the clear-cut kind of expectation, but also 9 wins isn't bad. You know what you lost on defense. But you go at Clemson, that's a really hard place to play. But other than that, I mean, they've beaten TCU. TCU will be good, though. They finished strong, so did Baylor. But I think the big thing is Kevin Jennings is got to be the right mindset right off the bat. And if he is, then they're going to be really, really hard to beat. Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. And I think, again, the most important thing is you keep your head coach, you keep your play caller, same guy, and you keep your quarterback. That's you have that holy trinity. Look out. Things happen. Good things happen, and we'll see. It's going to be so much fun, just as this always is. Billy, we appreciate you. Thank you for bringing insight that nobody else can for SMU. This was a great episode, man. We really appreciate your time. Anytime, guys. Had a blast.
Thanks again to Billy Embody for joining us. Make sure you follow him, social media, on the Pony Express, the On3 site, just all the stuff that he's putting out there. He does an awesome job. So follow Billy everywhere. Yeah, big shout out to him. And you heard the expectation, 10 wins. Let's go. Pony up. We're right back in business. I think that's more than doable. It's going to be really fun. We'll know the schedule here soon. That will be the awkward part of some of this, KG. We do not have the schedule for all these teams yet. We know who they play. We don't know when and where, or where. We know where they play, but not when. And the timing of all that is going to be fascinating. But a lot of fun, and I think a lot of excitement next year for SMU. But I want to give you guys a shout out. So grateful for all of you guys tuning in. Continue to subscribe.
I actually found a new feature yesterday, KG. So we are going to kind of switch things up. So Sunday night we'll be releasing things. Tuesday night we'll be releasing things. There's like this little notification bug. You can hit it on YouTube when we get those videos like kind of loaded. It's the preload before it launches, and it'll pop up and say Gramlich and Mac Lane live. It's really, really cool. So if you would continue to support us, hit that. You'll never miss a show. We have a lot of fun guests coming down the pipe. And before we know it, it's going to be the summer guest episodes, which is crazy to think about. But if you guys would just go over there, subscribe, turn on the alert buttons, and of course the OGs over on SiriusXM and Apple Podcasts, we greatly appreciate you guys as well. But until next time, we'll see y'all.